studio executives told Clint Eastwood, "Americans don't want to see the Japanese side. It won't make money. It's career suicide." His response? He made the film anyway, in Japanese, with Japanese actors, from the enemy's perspective. What happened next shocked Hollywood and changed war films forever. It was October 2005, in a Warner Brothers conference room in Burbank, California. Clint Eastwood, at 75 years old, sat across from a table full of studio executives, producers, and marketing executives. They were there to discuss his upcoming World War II film, Flags of Our Fathers, about the famous photograph of American soldiers raising the flag on Iwo Jima. The film was already approved, already in pre-production. Budget secured. Cast assembled. This should have been a routine production meeting. But Clint had come with a proposal that would make everyone in that room deeply uncomfortable. "I want to make a second film," Clint said, his voice that familiar rasp. "From the Japanese perspective. Their story of Iwo Jima." The room went silent. Not the thoughtful silence of people considering an idea. The stunned silence of people who couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Jeff Robinov, then president of Warner Brothers Pictures, spoke first. "Clint, let me make sure I understand. You want to make a companion film to Flags of Our Fathers, about the same battle, but from the Japanese point of view?" "Yes." "In Japanese?" "Yes." "With Japanese actors?" "Yes." "Showing American soldiers as what?" "The enemy." "Showing Japanese soldiers as human beings," Clint corrected. "Same as the Americans. Men following orders. Men scared. Men wanting to go home. Men dying for their countries." Another executive, someone from the marketing department, jumped in. "Clint, with all due respect, this is insane. We're talking about World War II. The Japanese were the enemy. Americans don't want to sympathize with the people who attacked Pearl Harbor. This film would be box office poison." "Maybe," Clint said. "There's no maybe about it." The marketing executive continued, his voice rising. "Post 9/11 America? You want to make a movie that humanizes the enemy? That shows their perspective? That suggests they weren't just evil villains, but actual people? Do you understand what you're proposing?" "I understand exactly what I'm proposing." A producer, a man who'd worked with Clint on several previous films, tried a different approach. "Clint, I respect what you're trying to do. I get the artistic impulse. But think about the practical realities. Japanese dialogue means subtitles. American audiences hate subtitles. That alone will cut your potential audience by 60%. Add in the controversial subject matter, and you're looking at a film that might not even recoup its production costs." "I'm not worried about the money," Clint said. "Well, we are," Jeff Robinov said, not unkindly. "Clint, you've earned enormous latitude with the studio. Your films make money. They win awards. You deliver on time and under budget. But this is different. You're not just making a risky film. You're making a film that could actively alienate your core audience." "My core audience," Clint said quietly, "is people who appreciate good stories. This is a good story. It's a Japanese story," another executive said. "And I mean that literally. Who is the audience for this film? Japanese people? There aren't enough of them in America to support a theatrical release. American World War II veterans? They'll be offended. General audiences? They won't sit through subtitles. Film critics? Maybe they'll appreciate it, but critics don't buy tickets." Clint leaned back in his chair. He'd expected this. He'd prepared for this. But he'd also already made his decision. "Let me tell you what happened," Clint said. "When I was researching Flags of Our Fathers, I read everything I could about Iwo Jima. American accounts, Japanese accounts, historical analyses. And what struck me was how similar the stories were. Japanese soldiers writing letters home to their families. American soldiers writing letters home to their families. Japanese soldiers terrified before battle. American soldiers terrified before battle. Japanese soldiers dying in the dark, calling for their mothers. American soldiers dying in the dark, calling for their mothers." He paused, letting that sink in. "The only difference," Clint continued, "was which side we were told to root for. But strip away the flags and the uniforms, and they were all just kids. 18, 19, 20 years old. None of them wanted to be there. All of them wanted to go home. The Japanese soldiers weren't monsters. They were men, and their story deserves to be told. That's a beautiful sentiment, Jeff Robinoff said carefully. But sentiment doesn't sell tickets, and Warner Brothers is a business. I understand that. Do you? Because what you're proposing could cost this studio tens of millions of dollars. If Flags of Our Fathers performs well, great. But if we also release a Japanese-language companion film that bombs, and I think we all agree it probably will, we're looking at a massive loss. The board will ask why we greenlight this, and I won't have a good answer. Clint was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was even quieter than usual, but somehow more powerful. In 1925, Clint said, a man named Tadamaki Kurabayashi was sent to the United States as a military attaché. He spent years here. He traveled across the country. He met American families. He wrote letters home to Japan describing how kind Americans were, how generous, how devoted to their families. When World War II broke out, he was ordered to defend Iwo Jima against American invasion. He knew he would die there. He knew his men would die there. And in his final letters, he wrote about how he didn't hate Americans. He just wished the war had never happened. The room was silent. Kurabayashi was a general, Clint continued. He was the enemy. By American standards, he was someone we should have celebrated killing. But he was also a man who loved his wife, who wrote poetry, who respected his enemy, who died doing a duty he didn't believe in. That's the story I want to tell. Not to make Americans feel guilty. Not to suggest we were wrong to fight, but to remind people that war isn't simple, that the other side isn't always evil, that sometimes everybody loses. That's not what American audiences want to hear, the marketing executive said. Maybe not, Clint replied, but maybe it's what they need to hear. Jeff Robinoff exhaled slowly. Clint, if we greenlight this, and it fails commercially, it could damage your reputation. It could damage the studio's relationship with you. Are you willing to take that risk? Yes. What if it's a disaster? What if American audiences reject it completely? Then I'll have made the film I needed to make. There was a long pause. The executives exchanged glances. This was Clint Eastwood, a man who delivered hit after hit, a man whose instincts had proven correct more times than not. But this felt different. This felt like artistic indulgence over commercial sense. How much would it cost? Jeff asked finally. $19 million, Clint said. I can shoot it back-to-back with Flags. Same locations, some of the same crew. I'll keep it lean. $19 million for a Japanese-language film that might not make back $5. I'll put my own money in, Clint said. I'll defer my salary. I believe in this film. I'm not asking you to take all the risk. I'm asking you to take it with me. Another long silence. If we do this, Jeff said slowly, you understand we can't give it a wide release. Limited theatrical, art house cinemas, awards consideration if it's good enough. But we're not putting this in 2,000 theaters. I understand. And if it fails, if it becomes a PR disaster, you handle the blowback. No hiding behind the studio. Agreed. Jeff looked around the room at the other executives. Some shook their heads. Others shrugged. No one looked enthusiastic. God help us, Jeff said finally. Okay, you can make your Japanese film. $19 million budget, not a penny more. Limited release. And Clint, this better be good. Because if it's not, this will be the thing people remember. Not Unforgiven. Not $1 Million Baby. The time Clint Eastwood made a film from the enemy's perspective, and it destroyed his legacy. I'll make it good, Clint said simply. What happened over the next 10 months became one of the most remarkable stories in modern filmmaking. Not because of what Clint filmed, but because of how he approached it. First, he assembled a Japanese cast. Not Japanese Americans. Japanese actors from Japan. He hired Ken Watanabe, one of Japan's most respected actors, to play General Kurabayashi. He cast Kazunari Ninomiya, a pop star with limited acting experience, as Seigo, a young soldier who just wants to survive and return to his wife. Then Clint did something even more radical. He told the American crew members that they would be making a film entirely in Japanese. Every line of dialogue, every scene. No English except in the end credits. Some crew members were skeptical. How do we direct actors when we don't speak their language? One asked. You watch their faces. Clint said. You watch their bodies. Emotion doesn't need translation. Truth doesn't need translation. If they're giving you truth, you'll know it. He hired a Japanese co-director, a translator who could bridge the language gap, but he insisted on being on set for every scene, directing through the translator, but mostly just watching, observing, trusting his actors. During production, word leaked to the press. The reaction was immediate and mostly negative. Conservative commentators called it anti-American propaganda. Veterans groups expressed concern. Some said Clint was dishonoring the men who died taking Iwo Jima. Others said he was too old, too out of touch, that he didn't understand modern audiences. One particularly harsh editorial in a major newspaper read, Clint Eastwood, who built his career playing American heroes, has decided to spend his twilight years humanizing our enemies. This isn't art. It's betrayal. Clint didn't respond to the criticism. He just kept filming. There's a story from the set, told by Ken Watanabe years later in an interview. They were filming a scene where Kurabayashi writes his final letter home, knowing he will die the next day. It's an intimate scene, quiet, just Watanabe sitting by candlelight, writing with a brush. After the first take, Clint walked over. Through the translator, he said, "That was good, but I want you to do it again. This time, I want you to forget you're playing a general. Forget you're playing the enemy. Just think about your own father. Think about if you had to write him a letter knowing you'd never see him again. What would you say?" Watanabe nodded. They did another take. Watanabe later said it was one of the most emotionally difficult scenes of his career because Clint had stripped away all the performance and left just the raw human truth. A man saying goodbye to his family. When they finished shooting, Clint had a rough cut within weeks. He showed it to a small group at Warner Brothers. The response was muted. Some people were moved. Others were confused. No one was sure if they just watched something brilliant or career-ending. Letters from Iwo Jima premiered in limited release in December 2006, just weeks after Flags of Our Fathers. The studio's worst fears seemed confirmed when opening weekend numbers came in. Small audience. Limited theaters. The general public showed no interest. But then something unexpected happened. Film critics saw it, and they didn't just like it. They loved it. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, calling it one of the most powerful war films ever made. The New York Times called it a masterpiece of empathy and craft. The Los Angeles Times wrote, Clint Eastwood has done something unprecedented. He's made a film that shows us not just the other side story, but their humanity. Word spread. Art house theaters that had planned week-long runs extended to 2 weeks, then 3. The film began playing in more cities. Audience word of mouth was extraordinary. People who saw it told friends. It became the kind of film people felt they needed to see. Then came award season. Letters from Iwo Jima was nominated for 4 Academy Awards: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Sound Editing. This was a Japanese-language film with no American stars about enemy soldiers, and it was nominated for Best Picture. At the Academy Award ceremony in February 2007, Clint sat in the audience with Ken Watanabe and the film's producers. When the Best Picture nominees were announced and Letters from Iwo Jima appeared on screen, the audience applauded. Not polite applause. Genuine, moved applause. The film didn't win Best Picture. That went to The Departed, but it won something more valuable. It won respect. It won recognition that a 76-year-old American director had made a film that transcended nationalism and told a universal human story. But the real victory came in Japan. Letters from Iwo Jima opened in Japanese theaters in December 2006. The response was overwhelming. Audiences wept. Critics praised it as the most honest depiction of Japanese soldiers ever filmed by a Western director. It became one of the highest-grossing foreign films in Japanese history. More importantly, it sparked a conversation in Japan about war, about honor, about the cost of nationalism. For decades, World War II had been a difficult subject in Japan. Too much shame, Too much unprocessed trauma. But Clint's film showed Japanese soldiers not as war criminals or fanatics, but as human beings caught in an impossible situation. One elderly Japanese man, a survivor of Iwo Jima, was interviewed after seeing the film. He said through tears, "For 60 years, I've carried shame about surviving when my friends died. I've never talked about the battle. But this film shows we weren't monsters. We were boys. Scared boys. Someone finally told our story with respect." Back in the United States, the film's impact was subtler but equally important. Veterans groups that had initially protested the film began to soften. Some veterans who saw it acknowledged that it didn't dishonor American soldiers. It honored all soldiers by recognizing their shared humanity. One American Iwo Jima veteran wrote a letter to Clint that was later shared with permission. "I spent 60 years hating the men who tried to kill me on that island. Your film didn't make me stop hating the war, but it helped me stop hating the men. They were just like us. Kids sent to hell by old men's decisions. Thank you for helping me see that." Letters from Iwo Jima earned $68 million worldwide against its $19 million budget. Not a massive hit by Hollywood standards, but profitable. More importantly, it changed the conversation about how war stories could be told. In the years that followed, Clint was often asked about the decision to make the film. His answers were always characteristically brief. It was the right story to tell. Someone needed to say that the enemy is human too. "I don't make films to be popular. I make films to be honest." But there was one interview, years later, where Clint expanded on his thinking. The interviewer asked why he'd risked his reputation and career on a film that everyone told him would fail. Clint thought for a long moment. "My father fought in World War II," he said finally. "He came home, but he was never the same. He'd have nightmares. He'd wake up screaming. And one night, when I was maybe 12 or 13, I asked him what he was dreaming about. He said, 'I dream about the German boy I killed.' He looked about 16. I shot him, and as he was dying, he called for his mother, just like I would have if I was dying." Clint paused. "My father said, he wasn't evil. He was just a kid in the wrong uniform at the wrong time." That stayed with me. The idea that war makes enemies out of people who, in any other circumstances, would have just been kids. When I read about Iwo Jima, I saw that same thing. Japanese soldiers calling for their mothers as they died, just like American soldiers. And I thought, someone should tell that story. Someone should remind people that war isn't heroes versus villains. It's tragedy. For everyone. The interviewer asked, "Were you worried about the backlash?" "Sure," Clint said. "But I was more worried about not making the film. About letting fear or commercial concerns stop me from telling a story that needed to be told. I'm old. I've had my career. If this film destroyed my reputation, at least I destroyed it trying to do something meaningful." "But it didn't destroy your reputation." "No," Clint said with the hint of a smile. "Turned out people were ready to hear that the enemy is human. They just needed someone to say it first." Today, Letters from Iwo Jima is studied in film schools as an example of empathetic storytelling. It's shown in history classes to teach students about perspective. It's screened at peace conferences as a reminder of war's human cost. Ken Watanabe, who played General Kurabayashi, said in a 2015 interview, "Clint gave voice to men who'd been silent for 60 years. Japanese soldiers who were portrayed as fanatics for so long. He showed them as fathers, sons, brothers, as men who wanted to live. That's not just good filmmaking. That's healing." The film screenwriter, Iris Yamashita, who researched Japanese accounts of the battle, said, "Clint never asked me to make the Japanese soldiers more sympathetic or more villainous. He just asked me to make them real, to show what they actually said, what they actually felt. That trust in truth, that's what made the film work." But perhaps the most telling impact came from an unexpected source. In 2008, an American high school history teacher in Ohio started showing both flags of our fathers and letters from Iwo Jima to his students, back to back. He'd show the American perspective one day, the Japanese perspective the next. "I want my students to understand," he said in an interview, "that history isn't simple. that the people we fought weren't monsters. That war is tragedy for everyone involved. Before these films, my students would watch war movies and cheer when the enemy died. After watching Letters from Iwo Jima, they're silent. They understand that every death is someone's son, someone's father, someone's friend. That's the lesson Clint taught. Not that America was wrong, but that everyone who dies in war is a loss. That teacher's approach spread. Other schools started showing both films. Veterans organizations began discussing the dual perspective. The films became teaching tools, showing that you can honor your own side while recognizing the humanity of the other. Clint Eastwood was 75 years old when he walked into that Warner Brothers conference room and proposed a film that everyone told him would fail. He was told it was career suicide, that Americans wouldn't accept it, that it was anti-American propaganda. He made it anyway. He made it because he believed that art isn't about confirming what people already think. It's about showing them what they haven't seen. It's about forcing uncomfortable truths into the light and trusting that people are capable of handling complexity. He made it because he understood that the opposite of war isn't peace. The opposite of war is empathy, the ability to look at someone who is your enemy and see a human being. That conference room full of executives saw risk. They saw potential financial loss. They saw controversy. Clint saw an opportunity to tell the truth. Americans don't want to see the Japanese side. They told him. Maybe not, he replied, but maybe it's what they need to see. He was right. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones everyone tells you not to tell. Sometimes the most necessary films are the ones that make everyone uncomfortable. Sometimes the bravest thing a filmmaker can do is show us not what we want to see, but what we need to see. Clint Eastwood spent 50 years playing American heroes, cowboys, cops, soldiers, men who shot first and asked questions never, men who represented American strength and righteousness. And then, at 75, he made a film about the enemy, not to diminish American sacrifice, not to suggest we were wrong, but to remind us that the men we fought were men. That war costs everyone. That humanity doesn't stop at national borders. That's not anti-American. That's profoundly human. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that empathy isn't weakness, that understanding your enemy doesn't mean betraying your side, and that the greatest artists are the ones brave enough to show us uncomfortable truths. Have you ever taken a stand that everyone told you is wrong? Have you ever done something risky because you knew it was right? Share your story in the comments. Because this isn't just about Clint Eastwood. It's about having the courage to tell the story no one wants to hear. It's about trusting that people are capable of holding complexity, of understanding nuance, of recognizing humanity even in those we're supposed to hate. The executive said, "This will destroy your career." Clint said, "Then it'll destroy my career doing something meaningful." That's the choice we all face sometimes. Play it safe, or risk everything for something true. Clint chose truth. The film that was supposed to end his career became one of his greatest achievements. Not because it made the most money, but because it changed how people think about war, about enemies, about shared humanity. That's the real story of Letters from Iwo Jima. Not a story about a successful film. A story about a 75-year-old man who refused to let fear, or commerce, or criticism stop him from telling a story that needed to be told. Someone needed to say that the enemy is human too. He did, and the world listened.